I'm in that boat too. I'm wondering, what do you think, or how did you actually get in the door
You
from your
know,
perspective? Yeah,
I it's hard to tell. I feel like I should ask the people who pulled my resume out of the
fair.
pile.
Okay,
um,
okay.
but I will say some of the tools I used Gemini, the Google AI tool, to do a lot of the cover letter writing and resume customization. I kind of had different versions of my resume. I didn't do a ton of customization, but I did write cover letters for every job that would let me submit one. And I did that with very little work using Gemini. So I didn't have to take a lot of time to do it. But I do think, and from the recruiter side too, I think it's nice even just to see that somebody put the effort into that. Now, make sure you check AI's work. I will say that. And I mentioned feeling kind of just lucky because I think sometimes it's a matter of timing. I will tell everybody that the sooner you apply to a job, the sooner you're likely to have your resume seen. And if you wait too long, if you spend too much time customizing, um, you will be at a, you know, number 250 in the application pool. And the way reviews happen is it's kind of one down. And so when you see something new open, know how you're going to move quickly, I guess would be my advice, so that you can be towards the top of the pile. And where you can network. Networking is not exactly how I got this job, but it is how I got other interviews that I had. So I do recommend that always.
Thank you. Cool. And then, so for the other panelists, yeah, a little bit of background on how you landed the current role, your current role.
Yeah, I can speak to it. So my career, I started off, I saw some consultants in the house. So I started off as a general strategy consultant, then specialized in data science. So I was doing quite a bit of analytical work, then moved to doing like growth marketing type work at a Series C startup. So I wanted to be in tech, but I couldn't go directly into product at the time, but it was for a mission-driven company. So I knew I wanted to be at a mission-driven company, took a growth marketing role, then went back to school. I got my MBA and I also got a master's in computer science. And then I found ESG Flow. I found ESG Flow through a friend. So that's a unique situation, but some tactics that I used during the interview process to get interviews is, one, I kept a close tab on like companies that are raising funds. So companies would just raise Series A or Series B, because those are the people that are now going to be looking for like people because they have the money to do so. So you could like, and then another thing I would do is the emails are typically standard within a company. So this might be a hack, but I would like go to like online forums and try to find like what like my email is at esgflow.com. So typically it's like first name, last name. I don't know how like condoned this is, but I will try to find the person like on LinkedIn and like reach out to them on LinkedIn, but then also shoot them an email, try to guess their email and be like, hey, like congratulations on your funding round. Like this is my background. Is there anything I can do to like help out like with your like the new paradigm that you're in? And that's kind of how I landed a few interviews. So I'm honestly not sure how much of that is okay, but there you go.
Nala or Benedict?
Yeah, I think I'd echo what you're both saying there. The two things I think that are really important to think about is kind of this concept of like your kind of luck surface area. It's all very well spending 2 or 3 weeks crafting a single application for one company, but the chances of you getting that are pretty slim. And I think just getting yourself out there and meeting as many people as possible is kind of
Excuse me. Sorry, honey.
Thanks, Stuart. Just you need to be getting yourself out there, and then the other thing is exactly what you're saying, Amy. I think if you're applying to a job where there's an open job role, you're kind of already unnecessarily competing against a large number of people. So I've been working as a product manager for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something. I don't think I've had a single job where I've applied via the kind of job post, and that's not because I'm super connected as a person. That's just because you're finding the companies that are likely to be about to be hiring, looking at those kind of VC portfolios, looking at funding round announcements, talking to people who can make introductions, and kind of getting your foot in the door before they actually open up a job role. That's the kind of easiest way to compete, because otherwise, as soon as you're applying on LinkedIn or something, you're immediately one of 200 CVs, and your chances are just like statistically much lower. So for me personally, what worked, I spent 12 months trying to get into climate, and that was more through a number of different consulting roles and contract roles, working with different people that I worked with before who then have moved into climate, and building up a bit of a kind of portfolio and just meeting a ton of people. And then by chance, this role that I got was someone I met in a lift in an energy company's office here in London, and they said, "Oh, you should talk to these guys. They're desperately in need of a product person, and they've just raised a pre-seed round." And like a week later, I started working with them on a contract basis.
That's amazing. I love the lux, increasing your lux surface area, and some of those tactics of how you might do that. A question, Benedict, that's come up from others is, you were saying you spent 12 months, you spent 12 months getting into climate and doing contract. How did you build your skills and credibility to be transitioning into the climate and specifically energy? And in fact, energy I found is one of the harder ones because it's been around the longest. So there's more, at least from my impression, there's more expectation and requirement around having experience. So how did you build that credibility?
Yeah, I think you can kind of separate the two things out. There's kind of your climate credentials, like demonstrating that it's not something that you're just sort of, you have a light preference for work in climate. So you can kind of get all the roles that I did when I was contracting with for different companies. I think actually one of them was through the work on climate. I just put out a kind of looking for some day rate contracting and someone picked it up. None of that work was with energy companies, but that does build the credibility that you're serious about climate and you're exploring the space. And then separately, specifically on the energy sector. So as a company, we at Granular very rarely hire people from the energy sector. You don't need a ton of industry experience to be moving into the space. I think you just need to kind of demonstrate a bit of seriousness, do your desk research before the call, be able to talk coherently about the product and ask some good questions. And I think that goes a long way.
And Nala, tell us a little bit about how you landed at Haven.
Sure. I also want to second what Anne-Marie mentioned in terms of sort of lifting the spirits. I came to my job my current job right from my previous company, but I've been laid off twice before. I've also spent months looking for a job. Hopefully some of the tips that we mentioned will be useful. I'm a big fan of persistence as a summary, but let me tell my story to clarify. So I was definitely conscious about getting into climate tech. After I did my master's in machine learning, which was 8 years prior, I had looked into climate tech at the time, but it was a lot less mature than it is right now. And then it so happens I was in my previous company, which is Yelp, and one of my favorite colleagues actually was leaving Yelp, and he mentioned that he was going to a climate tech company and that he had found it on Climate-Base. And that sort of coincided around the time when I was starting to think about the next step in my career. So he was sort of like as a connection networking that introduced me to Climate-Base, and that's how I found Haven Energy. And I think as a couple of people mentioned, I did apply, even though they were in the US. I'm based in Toronto and I'm still the only Canadian employee, which is sort of a little bit about the persistence part, because some companies would be open to hiring someone in another country or would have sort of the logistics in place to support that, which luckily Haven did, but it's a little bit of you wouldn't know until you know, because the job was really open for US as it was advertised. But I was really interested, and I guess another tip is that even though I didn't have any climate tech experience at the time, there were a lot of transferable skills which I highlighted in my application, and also the messages that I sent to now my current manager, which is the complexity. I think this is a huge thing. So I have a lot of complex tech experience from my work on data products and machine learning. So that was a highlight. And the other thing is Haven is a DTC company. So my experience in Yelp Home Services specifically and Yelp as a marketplace was one of the reasons why they chose me, essentially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love transferable skills is a great segue into the next question, which is, and maybe Amy, you want to go there? Or did you want to just follow up with that before I ask the next question?
I did. Something also, Benedict, your like contractor work reminded me. So being as part of a seed stage company, we end up having like spurts of time during the year where we just need help. And we've used Upwork for that. We've also just like hired part-time resources. So, and some of those part-time resources we've converted into full-time. So I do think that a lot of startups might not be in a financial position to be like, hey, like come on full-time, we have a full-time role for you. But I think it is really helpful to look even at contractor positions because it can get your foot in the door, you can build the experience, and then if it's a good fit, then there's a high likelihood of converting to full-time there too.
Great, thanks, Amy. So on the topic of transferable skills, and a question that's come up from a lot of folks, and I think all of you from your different perspectives could speak to this, is what have you found are some of the most important skills or valuable skills in the climate space? Is that different to a product role anywhere else? And again, identifying those transferable skills, Nala, you mentioned it, how might candidates demonstrate that to you in their applications? Anyone?
I would yeah, I can kick us off. I think complexity is a huge thing. Obviously, climate tech is sort of an umbrella term, really, with things ranging from very technical hardware products into essentially fintech. But I think in general, there's a lot to do with governance. There's a lot to do with complexity. So I would definitely highlight that. I am personally, when I am hiring, I usually look at resumes rather than cover letters. Cover letters are usually, to me, a secondary thing that I would do or look at only for like the top candidates after reviewing a resume. So I would highly recommend that whatever you want to highlight would be very specific to that company as part of your resume, and to customize that for what this company is specifically looking for. And then I think the second thing, other than complexity, by virtue of climate tech being such a new space, for across the board, for most of the roles that we're hiring, not just product, it's very hard to find someone who has done this job before. Even if it's like a sales manager, for example, it's hard to find someone who has both the industry experience, can fit into a tech startup. So I would definitely try and highlight learning and growth, and maybe career jumps, or just try and demonstrate the ability to learn something new. Yeah, that I think would go a long way.
I think I'll add on that when you think about your resume and you're thinking about making a shift to a new area, whether that's because the industry is new or the role's a little bit different than what you've done in the past, it's really important for you to remember how quickly recruiters are looking at resumes. And when we get 500 resumes or 1,000 resumes for a job, we're moving really quickly to start making those first cuts. So the critical information needs to be at the top of your resume. One thing I have found that is very helpful, because it is both quick to look at as a reader and quick to update as a applicant to a new role, is having a highlighted skills section. So whether that is highlighting, project management as a skill set along with product management, and then having maybe a couple of bullets below there that show examples of when you've done that. That is really, really critical in the sense that you are showing that you have those skills that they're looking for. And that's keywords from the job application. They're probably pretty standard for most product manager roles. And then showing, hey, here's not just I have this skill, here's how I've used this skill. And if you can do that in the top third of your resume, you're going to stand out. And you have to always, back that up down the resume. But I think being aware that showing those transferable skills at the very top of your resume, that's what we look at, right? I think there are studies that show the resume gets read kind of like the letter F. So first words down the side, the top of your section, and then we'll kind of skim things in the middle. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how am I representing these transferable skills. I think that's really important in standing out in the application pool as well.
Benedict or Amy, do you have anything to add to that around standing out, transferable skills, and balancing, getting in the door when without having direct experience necessarily?
I think on if you're applying directly to a job and you're in the kind of CV, you're trying to get your CV noticed, there's definitely a few kind of basic table stakes that are still shockingly not followed by people. So, simple stuff like a proper design template, it needs to look really good. It needs to be really easy to read. I think the stat is something like 4 to 5 seconds for most initial CV reviews. So a really easy way to immediately, even subconsciously in the person who's reviewing its mind, to just get yourself kind of discounted as something that doesn't look good. So just find something online, Figma, or there's a million templating tools. I think a personal message does go quite a long way. I can't remember who was saying, a personal reach out, you can probably guess their email. You can definitely find them on LinkedIn. Work for Amy. I think after you've applied rather than before makes sense. And again, just using that as a kind of 1 or 2 sentence. You don't want to do paragraphs. And definitely, although I think LLMs are your friend for kind of brainstorming, it's very easy for them to write very, very generic text. So we see a lot of the same application. We see applications with basically exactly the same wording because someone has taken our job spec and copied it into an LLM, and you get them referencing the same sentences. So definitely use it for brainstorming, but be wary about copying and pasting too directly. And then I think on the transferable skills thing, I'd agree with what's been said before. I think climate is such a broad space that it's a bit of a red herring to say what are the transferable skills about moving into climate. Like every single sector is going to be impacted by climate, so you can kind of take a pick. I think the things that are more relevant are, tuning your application to the size of the company. It's much, much more different applying to a giant tech company or applying to a seed stage company, regardless of what industry they're in. So thinking along those kind of framings is probably more useful. And then maybe the one just basic thing is obviously enthusiasm for climate needs to come through strongly, but also there's no point spending the first 10 minutes of an interview talking about why climate is important and reiterating that, because obviously the person on the other end of the camera believes that too. You can kind of state that and move past it really quickly, both in, I think, the CV and any cover letters that you do and in any interviews. Sorry, slightly rambling answer.
No, that's super helpful. Amy, anything to add?
Yeah, so many great answers, I guess. From the CV's perspective, for a big company, I would really rely on figures, quantify your impact as much as possible. For a startup, for me, what I look for when I read through is someone that has hustle and productivity, because within a small startup environment, you kind of want someone that's that will jump on things and get things done. So reading through some resumes, you can just feel the energy and how they will come and take proactive action. So those are things I look for. And obviously this goes without saying, but for interviews, do a little research. ESG reporting is what we do. The number of interviews I've been on where companies have no idea like what, regulatory frameworks there are. And I know that like you can learn all that, but just do a little bit so that you can go into the meeting with enough nuggets of knowledge that you can have an engaging conversation with the interviewer. Like I feel like the best interviews I've had are interviews where it's not like me just like directly asking a question, but where I feel like I'm actually able to have a conversation with the person about the things we're passionate about, which is climate, as well as like whatever that be design or product or engineering, like the field that they're in.
Love that. And that actually leads me to almost the reverse of this question. You've both, you and Benedict both touched on this around how candidates essentially discount themselves. So Benedict, you mentioned, if the resume is basically hard to read, it's going to be discounted almost immediately. And Amy, you were talking about coming in with nuggets. And I'm curious if there are other examples that you have in mind of where candidates have inadvertently discounted themselves because they missed something, or something something obvious or even subtle that would have been helpful for them.
I think something that people don't do, I'm not sure it's necessarily discounting yourselves, but I think it falls in that category of you're doing yourself a disservice if you are not using numbers in your resume. If you're not talking about how many how many users your product had, if you're not talking about how long it took you to go from 0 to 1 or 0 to beta, if you haven't included percentage increases, like if you're not showing the impact of your work, I think that goes to the passion, right? I think when I see a resume that brags, and I know it's very hard to brag very often, but this is the one place where you've got to show yourself off. If I see a resume where they are just talking about all the things that they've done in that really quantitative and clear way, that shows me how passionate you are. That shows me that you're not just talking the talk. You're not just using AI's words, but you're showing me what it's looked like to you. And so by having your resume not go there, I see that a lot. I think it is the number one feedback I give people when I look at somebody's resume is you need more numbers. Find a way to show the impact of your work. And that's true of product management. It's true of engineers. It's true of everybody. So I highly, highly recommend thinking through how you can highlight that.
I think I have maybe a discounting example. As I mentioned, I'm really big on learning and growth. And one way to show that in your resume is to show sort of the jumps that you have made. So sometimes there would be, obviously the general recommendation and the correct recommendation is resumes should be succinct and should exceed 1 page unless there is a reason. But then if that's the case, then you would typically sort of drop the things that are quote unquote irrelevant for the job. But then actually sort of, and why the balance is hard to get right, actually showing that you have made jumps from very different things into where you are now sort of builds the picture. And I think that this is part of what I would stress of perseverance and really customizing the job. Because if you have, for example, done 6 jumps, you will want to be selective and choose like 2 out of those 6, put those and then focus on your current role. And then that would build a very specific picture for that specific company rather than just remove everything that is irrelevant to the role you're applying for.
Right. So it's starting to carry that thread of learning and growth and being representing that in the resume selectively. That makes sense.
I think I'd echo that again. So our screening call, no matter what role you're applying for at Granular, basically has kind of 3 sections. First bit is just, do you understand what we do? So you've done some research and you can turn up and like talk coherently about it. And it's incredible how many people don't do that. The second one is talk about a piece of work that you've done, and it doesn't have to be anything to do with energy, but based on your understanding of what you do, the best candidates are people who can take an example of a piece of work they've done and draw really clear parallels. They talk about data ingestion, which is really important to us, or the kind of linear optimization elements of our platform, or they find some creative way to draw a parallel. And it doesn't really matter if the parallel is perfect, but you can see that they understand what we do and they understand how they're trying to position themselves as relevant. And then the third bit at the end is the kind of the trick question, well, not trick question, but like the thing that people often do fall down on is just, we leave 5 minutes at the end for questions, and it's astonishing how many people are either asking, you know, stuff that's pretty obvious public online, you know, how big is the company, etc. And the best candidates are the people who have done the research well enough to be able to ask pretty impressively detailed questions about, you know, the regulation or specific pieces of news that are relevant to us or something. And the question, the form of the question is kind of more important to my answer, to be honest, if that makes sense. Like, it's such a strong signal if they can ask a good question.
On that topic of questions, something that I've sometimes in researching, and maybe others as well, how do you balance asking strategic or good questions with not being critical? Does it matter if they're critical, or do you want them to be positive but also insightful? I guess, what's the tone of those questions?
I think critical is fine as long as it's delivered in a, you know, you don't want to be, but if you can take the critical stance and it's a valid critical stance, then the company's probably done some thinking about it and you can have an interesting conversation. I think, yeah, the tone is better. The tone is more important than the content if it's critical.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been offended by like a question that kind of maybe is curious about the industry, or like, you know, I think it's healthy to have a certain level of skepticism, especially for startups, right? Like, how is the market looking? Like, what's actually differentiating your product from this other product? I think the questions that I get thrown off by more are like questions that just come out of like the blue, where it's like, oh, like the question they ask is like, oh, what are the next steps? Well, like, you know, like those offend me more than questions that are based on actually a healthy amount of research.
Yeah, if what's the next steps is the only questions you have, that's just as bad as not having any questions at all. Some questions I keep in my back pocket are things about the culture that you can't learn from a website, that you can't learn online. Tell me about how you have fun at work as a team. Tell me about how you interact in a remote work culture or in your office environment. And I actually recommend people ask those questions to multiple interviewers, because it gives you the different perspectives around. And I think that's just as important, to Benedict's point and Amy's point about asking interesting questions about the business and your role and how you're going to succeed in the role. I will never shoot down a candidate who goes, well, what does success look like in this role? And maybe with the context added of, you know, I see the market going in this direction. How do you see this role being successful in pushing our product down that path, or some additional context to that matter that shows both interest and research? Highly recommend those types of questions as well.
I want to second Anne-Marie here, and I think it's sort of such a classic mistake not to ask questions. Very important to try and understand the culture, even if it's not from the perspective of do I accept an offer if they give me one or not, but even just to set yourself up for success. And sort of related, I also ask, related to what Anne-Marie said of asking different people about the culture and success, I ask different people what the company priorities are. And if everyone is saying something different, then that's an indication. Not necessarily sort of, I'll never work with these people, but it is, you know, something to keep an eye out on. And I think for me, what I love most in terms of interviewee questions is if they sort of pick up on what's going on in the company, either through research or through how I had conducted the interview, and then ask questions that really show that they understand what's going on, and which is essentially an indicator to me that they are going to come in and be productive, because they got it just from the interview, let alone after they spent a couple of days or weeks in the company. So an example to illustrate the point, I was interviewing someone And then the question that he had at the end of the interview was about how we are balancing focus and doing multiple threads at the same time, which was sort of spot on to where we were at the time, and was a huge plus for me in assessing that candidate as it happens.
Interesting. Okay, no, that's really helpful. That's really interesting how important questions actually are. Okay, so switching gears slightly and focusing more broadly on climate and questions that people have about being in climate. So one question I've got for you is, what are some challenges that you've encountered that are actually unique to climate? And of course, you're each looking at climate in a different lens, but in your chosen sectors, have there been some unique challenges that you hadn't encountered before that is reflective of where we are with the climate crisis?
I would say my answer, which I hope is useful, is that I don't think that climate tech is sort of that unique. Hopefully that's a good indicator and makes, you know, job search a little bit easier. I know it's sort of a newer field, but that's, you know, the analogy of that was how I worked on AI in AI startups, for example, when there weren't that many established practices for it, or how I personally worked on a ton of B2B products with the background that most of the product literature out there is really from DTC hyper growth sort of background, and how I'm able to take from that what's useful for B2B and leave what is not. So I would say, which is hopefully helpful in summary, just focus, I think, on transferable skills. It's more approachable than you think it is.
Thank you.
I would say for my company specifically, we do reporting data collection. So ESG reporting as a landscape is changing a lot. So I guess every industry has its own challenges, but I feel like a lot of times for us, we're building in a situation where it's very ambiguous because we're like creating this ESG reporting industry. So that has, from a product perspective, some challenges because, I mean, this is something my designer said that I was really interested by, where she was used to kind of existing solutions and then interviewing people about those solutions, understanding their pain points, and then designing the solution to be better. Whereas for us, a lot of cases, existing solutions are like spreadsheets, emails, and SharePoint. So there weren't any other like platforms to like rethink or redesign. So that I think is a unique challenge. Second thing is kind of the education gap of our clients almost, where everyone is new to the climate space, but also like even our clients who are just now getting started on their reporting journey, they have a lot of knowledge gap in terms of what needs to be done. So there's a lot of, I guess, more hand-holding that needs to happen within the product than you would typically think in terms of, it's not just like UI, UX type hand-holding, but also like educational type material within the platform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think I'm going to do a cop-out answer and say there isn't anything I think unique about climate. It's always unique to the company or the domain that you're working in, but yeah, too much of an umbrella term.
Cool, agreed. Okay, thank you. Awesome, so that wraps up our panel section of the event, and we are going to create breakout rooms with each of our panelists, and you as attendees are welcome to join the room that you like, or switch around as you prefer. And we have just about 15 minutes to chat with our panelists and ask any specific questions you have for them. So thank you, panelists, for this part of the section. We'll be back for a couple minutes at the end just to close out. But in the meantime, feel free to hop around the breakout rooms and ask any specific questions you have. And she's going to help us get those breakout rooms going.
I named 4 breakout rooms with your panelist name. So if you could join respective room, that'd be great. And then attendees can feel free to hop into whichever rooms with whichever panelists they want to talk to. Thank you.
So are we gonna get a prompt?
Nala, I think you just need to select your breakout room.
There's an icon here. Okay, all right.
Or if any of the attendees want to stay here, talk to each other, we're open to that too, whichever you want.
Thanks, Chi. Catching up on all these chats. What's been going on?
Yeah, the chat's been really great. Just a naive Zoom question. Where do I find the breakout rooms UI? I'm looking hard for it.
In the bottom, you might have an icon that says more with 3 dots.
Ah, there you go.
And then breakout rooms.
Thanks, Lauren.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to amplify from the chat. Someone asked for a quick reminder of the roles and orgs of those 4 individuals. Yeah, I'd second that
Amy,
one.
Yeah, Amy. Okay, I'll just put it in here. Okay, oopsies. Let me just.
If
But
you
I'll
put
tell
in
you.
the chat, I don't think it's gonna like broadcast to everyone.
Amy is head of product at an ESG company. Anne Marie is a global director of people ops at Angaza. Benedict is working in energy at Granular, senior PM, but also hiring manager. Anala, head of product at Haven, which is also energy, but also she focuses on machine learning.
Rolamian, I think if you want to broadcast that, there's a broadcast feature.
Oh, how do you do that? Do you want to do that?
Looking for it too.
Okay, let me.
Okay, yeah, I can text. Can you tell me what?
Yeah, I'll just head of product at ESG Flow.
Amy is hit.
There we go.
Okay.
Do I need to be in a breakout room to see it?
If you want to. I can drop it here too. I don't know where that popped up. I said to everyone, it's a pleasure.
There's not enough characters for me to.
To broadcast? Oh, well,
Yeah.
people will figure it out. Good point for next time, though.
Micah, do you have any question or you need any help? Okay.
Cool. It's an equal split. That's so great. I love it. We lost a bunch of people along the way.
Yeah.
That's also interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there were about 49 or 48 people for the panel. And then I guess 20 people dropped for breakout rooms.
Yeah, it
Which is
happens
fine.
a lot when there's a like free form conversation to get people get busy and drop, and that's totally okay. I don't
Of
think
course.
each of them could handle like 10 people each
No.
anyways.
Yeah. That was fun.
I feel like the conversation was getting into a lot of like recruiting and
Yeah.
resume instead of product and climate.
Well, I think it's about landing a role, right? But yeah, there was more generic. I guess generic. Oh, I guess we don't really have to record this part, do we?
Did you stop or do
I
I?
didn't stop.
Okay,
Do
let
you want to
me
stop?
close our rooms.
We're first.
Oh, okay. Yes. We'll wait for the other groups to join us. How was that discussion?
Yeah, I think it was good that obviously it is for the other people to say, but I wanted to just take the chance before people come in and thank you, Lorianne, for the wonderful moderation and for including me in the panel.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you. This is really fun. Have we lost everybody?
When I
Oh,
click close breakout rooms, they give everyone 60 seconds to
Oh, okay.
well, 9 seconds left, so it will automatically lead people back. Right.
That's good to know. The tricks of the trade with Zoom. Wonderful. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had fun conversations, and I really want to give a huge thank to our panelists, Amy, Benedict, Nana, Anne-Marie. You were awesome, such great tactical advice, and your sympathies to all of us looking for a job. And a huge shout out to Chi. She's been my co-pilot, and also Kathy as a volunteer with the Work on Climate Product Managers Group, as well as Mabel, but I don't think she was able to make it today. So thank you, everybody. If you're not already part of Work on Climate, go to workonclimate.org. There's a Slack channel, it's super active. Join our product manager channel. We post more events, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Lorianne.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This is lovely.
Thank you.